make any comments, please turn on your microphones today, and so everybody can hear you. I would like to welcome Darlene Burcham from Franklin County, the city manager interim. And then also we have Stephen Carter here from Portsmouth, the new city manager. Welcome. Bob, I don't think we have anybody else new here, do we?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so no first timers. So that takes us to item 2 on the agenda, and that's the approval or modification of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Okay, motion and second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Crum, do we have public comments?
Nobody submitted public comments in advance. I'll ask if anybody would like to address the commission today. Seeing none, Mr. Chairman, I'll send it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. Just want to take a minute or two with a matter of special privilege and ask Mr. Bennett say a few words. He had asked if he could have the microphone to address the commission.
Good afternoon, and my concerns are at 58 and 460 and 17 and 664. When the accident happens, it ties up everyone in the whole region. No one can get out. Everything is blocked up throughout our city, throughout the trying to get out. Evacuation routes are the same. And I think that's really, to me, is important for the area of Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, and all east side of Suffolk, at trying to get out and can't get out because we don't have no access of getting out. I think we need to look at what we can do as a region to try to improve those roads or some way of having the emergency access of getting out of Suffolk, especially if you have evacuation. And Kings Highway Bridge is out, so that's another factor that we have that's really devastating to us. Another route that actually blocks up the whole entire city. So I would like for the board, if you will, take a look at it and see if anything that we can do as a region to look at what we can do to try to improve that section of the roads, so we can have some access for emergency use and for evacuation.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. In a previous TPO meeting, there was some conversation about traffic and speeding and that type of thing, and Mr. Duman made some good observations about how we can lower speed on those roads, which I think will be helpful in diminishing the amount of accidents and eliminating some of that cost. But thank you for your comments. Okay, moves us on to Executive Director's Report. Mr. Crum.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of items. First, my monthly report is included in the agenda for your review. I'd be happy to respond to any questions. I did want to make mention of a couple of quick items. First, I would like to introduce a new staff member. I'd like to ask Otisa Mitchell. She might stand very quickly. Otisa joined us just on April 16th as a staff accountant in the finance team for the HRPDC and HRTPO. She comes to us from Mythics in Virginia Beach, where she was a accounts receivable person and also has significant experience as a payroll specialist, and is certainly a great addition to our finance team. So could you please all join me in welcoming Otisa? Secondly, if you didn't get a chance to stop at the Ask HR Green trailer on the way in, please consider doing so after the meeting. I think you're all aware of it. Ask HR Green is an environmental education program that the HRPDC staff, namely Katie Collifer and Rebecca Easttip, just do a magnificent job with. This is a program where you pool your money here and you're able to meet some of your environmental education requirements from some of your permits in a much more cost-efficient manner than if you would pursue them individually. So not only is it a place where the PDC saves you money, but they really do a tremendous job of community outreach on environmental awareness related to water quality, related to sustainable living, etc. The trailer you see out there has already been to almost 25 events this year already. They partner, Katie and Rebecca partner with your locality staff. So when they go to different events or happenings in the community, whether it's a farmer's market or a fair or some event, it's being staffed by locality staff and our PDC staff. Please, on the way out, stop by, say hello to Rebecca, Katie, and pick up some of the information. Some of the items are incredibly useful. So I hope everybody takes a moment to do that. But Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for today.
Well, thanks, sir. Takes us now to the Community Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. We have not met since my last report, but the Bylaws Subcommittee is continuing to work asynchronously. In fact, we'll have another meeting tomorrow. We're trying to make some improvements to our bylaws to improve accessibility for members. Thank you.
Sir. Mr. Roman, can you walk us through the consent agenda?
Yes, your consent agenda today was provided to you in advance of today's meeting in the agenda packet. Mr. Chairman, I would ask for approval of the consent agenda, which includes items 6A through and including items 6H, please.
Any discussion or questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
There's a second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes. Okay, next on the agenda is our HRPDC FY25 work.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Before I present this, Whitney Ketchmark had a few comments that were going to be part of Bob's report, so I apologize for that.
All right, this is really quick, but I just wanted to give you an update. So if you recall, back in June last year, we accepted a grant to do a climate pollution reduction program, and that gave us money to do a plan for how to reduce greenhouse gases. So we've been working on that, and we'll continue to do that. But there was this follow-on grant, if you took that money, that you were eligible for implementation grants. And then it's a big pot of money, pretty big for the entire country, $4.6 billion. It was due April 1st, and I just wanted to let everyone know we did put in applications. There's one specific to Hampton roads for $98 million. It had three components. It asked for money to convert about 75,000 streetlights to LED technology. The second piece was to do EV charging, electric vehicle charging stations, about 400. And then we asked for a little bit of money to do a strategic plan on additional locations and to evaluate whether or not we needed upgrades to the electric grid to support that. And then the third part of our application was trail expansion. We asked for about 12 miles of trails, bits of the Trail 757 on the peninsula, and then it was the boat trail back when we put it in, and then a few on the south side as well. So we're excited about that. That was, like I said, the first application. There was another application, a regional one, that the Washington Council of Governments put in on behalf of that metro area, Richmond and here. Its focus is on making buildings more energy efficient, specifically commercial buildings and municipal buildings. And you can imagine for those three metro areas, they asked for $97 million. That wouldn't go that far if we're paying for the upgrades. But what we're paying for, if we get the money, is to get a third party to help people figure out all of the rebates and tax incentives and all the programs that exist now that most people aren't using because it's just too hard. And one of the big focuses in our application is to look at low-income multifamily housing, because those are places where oftentimes the owner maybe doesn't have the incentive because they're not the person paying the electric bill. So we have those two, and then a separate one in the region, HRC put an application to make their treatment plants more efficient. So we did our best to go after that funding. I just want to thank everybody's staff for being really responsive. It was a crazy timeline, and nobody ever had all the information they really wanted, and there were a lot of sort of rules about what we could ask for, including being able to do whatever we asked for within 5 years. So fingers crossed that it was worth the time and effort, but I'll keep you posted. We'll find out in September.
And Mayor, if I can say, first off, my apologies to Whitney. I forgot to mention her under my report. But Whitney thanked your staff. I just want to thank Whitney. When she came to Greg and I with this proposal and the lift that was going to be needed over the winter months, It was one of those conversations, Whitney, are you sure you want to do this? And as Whitney said, what an opportunity, we've got to try. A lot of nights, a lot of weekends, and I just want to thank Whitney and team. I can't thank them enough because it was a huge lift.
And thank you, Mr. Grutendorf, for remembering Whitney. That is a lot of good work, and I certainly do appreciate all your efforts there. So now, Greg, let's hear you.
Big drum roll, Greg.
Yeah, Whitney gets the fun one. I get the work program. Can we pull the presentation up? The work program that you have sent to you in the agenda is this riveting document of 70 pages. I encourage you to flip through it. There's a lot in there. I just wanted to take you through just a few of the things that are in here just to kind of give you a taste of what's in there. And I'll start with what we have in here. It's kind of interesting. Whitney brings up the climate pollution reduction grant. This work program is what we expect to do in the coming year, FY 2025. The climate pollution reduction grant was not in the FY 2024. A lot of stuff comes up through the year that we don't know is coming up, and I think a lot of the work that staff does comes up kind of on the fly. So these are just the things that we expect to do. I guarantee you next week, somebody on staff is going to come across something that looks like an opportunity that we need to jump on that won't be in the work program, and they'll go after it. But this is just the stuff that we know that we're working on. And again, I just wanted to touch on it. Emergency management. You all are familiar with John Sadler. He does a lot to bring people together to discuss how we can work together in times where we're in our greatest need. So there's a lot that goes on in just coordination and cooperation here. One of the things you might be a little bit more familiar with is UASI grant, which has brought in roughly $60 million since PDC first applied for this in 2007. So that's $60 million that flows into the region and purchases a lot of the emergency management equipment. But there's interoperable communications. There's a lot of technical assistance. But a lot of that happens right in this room that you're sitting in here. So your staff comes in here. John has multiple committee meetings, and they get together here and they discuss tactics and how they can work together to ensure that we're cooperating and communicating properly. So when emergency events hit, we're doing things together and we're doing it right. Bob was just talking about Katie and Rebecca and the trailer up front. I would echo, if you haven't had a chance to see it, go see it. Katie let me know that trailer is over 30 years old, and they're hoping to squeeze another 5 years out of it. But I mean, it's literally been to thousands of events. And the reason they have this trailer is because they can do things much more efficiently and much more effectively when the communities get together and work together to meet state permit requirements. But not only do they meet state permit requirements, they excel at it. There's a whole bunch of awards that we've had in the building for a long time for Ask HR Green and some of the work that they do there. But we also have helped other program, which helps people pay their bills, and a lot of initiatives that you'll see when you're around the community helping us to do better with the environment. Incredibly effective. Housing and Human Services. If we look down the list here, you can see Regional Housing Service Portal, Regional Housing Consortium, Regional Adequate Housing Assessment that you all heard about lately. The word regional keeps coming up. This past year, our housing team received the Across the Region Service Award. There's a lot that goes in to getting people together and trying to improve the lives of people across the region. Through down payment closing cost assistance, through loans fund partnership, but also best practices in the housing human service arena. Looking at our planning and economics team, there are maps literally all over the region and all sorts of publications. There's a ton of maps online. We have a very robust GIS. I would say team, it's Sarah Kidd, but she acts like she's a team because she does so much. We do economic impact studies, solid waste planning, the planning and economics group through Eric has brought in $35 million through the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. You see Nikki's Economic Monthly. There's rural transportation planning that actually goes through the PDC on the planning and economic side, forecasting, and a great deal of technical assistance, because when stuff lands at the PDC, a lot of times it lands on this department to kind of address it. You know, as a recovering economist, I would love to try and figure out the return on investment of our water resources team. The amount of work that they do that I guess is not seen in the regulatory realm, drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, they're all over the state and beyond, really representing this region. But there's just a great deal of technical expertise that the state really relies on, localities rely on, so that when you get a room of people together, they know they can come here, and the people on this team know what they're talking about. They can make policy recommendations that are not only understood, but they're followed, and they save our region millions and millions of dollars. They make sure that what we're doing is effective. They make sure that we're looking towards the future so that we'll be more resilient. And things come up like Whitney working on climate change and trying to bring millions and millions of dollars to the region again. So we're constantly working to improve the region through going after money, but also making sure that the policies that the feds and the state are putting on us are strong policies, effective policies, policies that make sense. And the team here really is just a backbone for, I think, the state in recognizing. I see Jay Burness in the back from HRSD. He can wave and tell us how great the team is because he knows firsthand. But they do an incredible amount of work with your staff and the state folks to make sure that we're on the right path. Inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. This is, you know, one of the goals for the PDC is really to view everything we do through a lens of equity. And Kwan over there is really helping us to do that. I think it's just really a new day. And we're not just trying to meet requirements, we're trying to exceed requirements, we're trying to do what's right. There's a whole lot of work to be done here, and Kwan certainly has us on a good path. I would challenge anybody to find a regional organization that is doing more in this field than what Kwan has the PDC doing. So I'm excited where we're going, a lot of work to be done here, but I think we're on a good path. And then, of course, our communications team, which is around the room right now, they bring us, you know, they do, of course, do the media relations and public information coordination, the newsletter you get from them, public notices, outreach and engagement. There's just a lot going on there. We're really striving to bring what we do out into the community to make sure people are aware, that people are informed, and recognize the valued resource we have. It's really tough to explain what the PDC does and what we provide. There's no simple way to do it justice. So if you read through the work program, I don't know that you'd get the sense of really all that we're doing. We do have our base requirements, and a lot of the work we do is stuff that we're required to do. But on top of that, we are going after grants. We're really trying to improve the lives of the region as much as we can. But there's a whole lot of facilitation that nobody ever sees. Coordination efforts, bringing staff together. I would say one of the things that makes me most proud of our team is how they convene people to bring out best practices, so that when you're from James City or York County and you're meeting with folks from Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, right, best practices go back out to Hampton. They learn what's going on and they share their best practices so that the localities can all be learning from each other and doing things better. And that coordination, that technical expertise is incredibly fascinating when you watch it happen. I wish I could just videotape some of the things that happen in some of these meetings. But there's a whole lot that goes done that is really under the radar. And when I say what we provide, I think this kind of gives a sense of what the team does. I'll point out, I'm sure you all have seen this mural several times now. Joe Turner in the back, he can wave, but his daughter did this mural, and it's just an example, a small example of, we look for talent, we look for opportunity, we look for wherever we can, scraping what we can together to make change and to make things better. And so when I look at our team, I would challenge you to find a team that's working harder and doing more to really increase the quality of life for the region, because we have a small team, but they're incredibly dynamic. They work incredibly hard for this region. And again, the work program only touches on a small part of that. They do so much more than that, but I just wanted to kind of give you a taste of what staff are doing and what we have for the year ahead. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Grutendorf. I'm always amazed at all that we do here at the PDC, and it's an aggressive work plan, but look forward to supporting it and helping in any way we can. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Pursuant to Mr. Bennett's comments, and I think we all would agree with you, I hope when you start looking at this, like yesterday, you'll include the emergency management staffs, because I would bet they have tried to deal with this for decades, and I'll bet that they have some very significant input, as well as that relationship with VDOT, where it might accelerate looking at it. I mean, we are in critical trouble if there truly is an evacuation. And added to that, North Carolina has never agreed to divert their evacuation. So not only do we have the south side areas to worry about, they won't stop, particularly the Outer Banks evacuation from coming north on 158. And I think the emergency management teams in this area are so good. I'm sure you were planning, but in case you weren't, that would be my request, that they come in immediately. And Hampton and Newport News probably have additional comments, because you're going to be in that same boat. You won't be there, maybe.
Our city manager might have some comments. I don't have any right now. But let me offer one thought though. And I'm trying to remember what state practiced the evacuation. But to my knowledge, we've never tried it.
We have.
Which concerns me, that, we've got on our side at certain exits, we've got the bars that will prohibit, I think, traffic from going, exiting, and only allowing traffic, I think, one direction or something like that. But I would not know how it actually would work. And I think that's a fallacy in our planning, whether it's regional or state, that we've never tried to see what would happen. And of course, you don't want to create a panic. And I think the last time we actually tried to do an evacuation, I think it was under Governor Northam, where everyone had to leave. I think it was like 3 days notice or whatever. But in an actual emergency, we've never really seen it tried. So again, that's my only comment related to emergency management.
I know, I appreciate that comment, and I know that Pavitra is listening. Well, we actually have done an analysis of that. I think it was back in 2007, 2008, where we had a trial where we actually brought the bars down to make sure that they were functioning to reverse lanes, but it has been a long time. But I'll leave that to John Sadler and Pavitra, and they can have a discussion, and perhaps that's something we can circle back with you all on. One other thing that I wanted to share with you, if there's more comments, I'd be happy, or questions, I'd be happy to address them. We do need a vote on this to approve the work program, but before we do that, if we could play the video, for those who attended the TPO meeting, y'all have already seen this, but this is a work program video that staff have put together to kind of help explain what it is that we do and why we're here.
To the
regional building. The home of the HRPDC and HRTPO.
This is our typical office building.
This is where Hampton Roads comes together.
Share ideas and plan for the future.
We work to build connections across this great region,
To tackle issues that cross local boundaries.
like protecting water quality, emergency preparedness, and transportation infrastructure.
Our focus is on building more resilient communities, expanding access to broadband internet services,
And housing opportunities for all residents of Hampton Roads. We're a hub for data maps and information sharing. And we empower residents to be environmental stewards of this place we all call home.
whether it's congestion relief, passenger rail, or trails. It's our job to make your trip as safe and efficient as possible.
We keep transportation projects moving.
We're very planning to travel forecasting. We're planning tomorrow's transportation system today.
And for all of our efforts, we evaluate, monitor, and keep the public engaged.
Collaboration is not just what we say, it's what we do.
Because when 17 localities come together to advocate, share ideas, and pool resources,
Big things happen in Hampton Roads.
If there are no other comments, would somebody like to make a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Somebody got that. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion approved. Next is, we're going to talk about the FY25 budget. Mr. Crum.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I really drew the short straw. Whitney got to talk about climate change. Greg got a nice video, but I get to talk with you about our proposed budget for this year. I will be asking for action for approval of today's budget by the commission. This budget does come to you from your Personnel and Budget Committee with a recommendation for approval. The HRTPO board voted unanimously to approve the budget I'm about to present to you at their meeting earlier today. Before I start, I really want to thank Sheila Wilson, our Chief Financial Officer. Sheila did an incredible amount of work, as she always does, on this budget. I think many of you know that Sheila, come November, will be moving on to retirement, and we're really happy for her, but we're really sad that this is going to be her last budget with us. But having said that, she's just done a tremendous amount of work once again, and I want to publicly thank her for that. So I'll move quick. Some of you heard this at the TPO meeting earlier, but the fiscal year that we work with starts July 1. It runs through June 30th. This year, you and the TPO board asked us to do something a little bit different, where we had a work session with our Personnel and Budget Committee mid-fiscal year. We did it on January 18th, and that's where we really received some high-level direction on what we should do with salary adjustments and other things within our proposed budget. On May 2nd, we held a 2-hour meeting with the Personnel and Budget Committee. They went through every line of the budget in a lot of detail and formed their recommendation to bring this budget proposal to you today for your consideration for approval. So this is your Personnel and Budget Committee, led by Mayor Pons from the city of Williamsburg. Mr. McCarty is the chair of the TPO. Mayor Shannon Glover, the HRPDC vice chair, is a member of the PMB, as is Mayor Helsel from Poquoson. And then Randy Keaton serves as the treasurer of the HRPDC. And then you have a CAO from the South Side, Mr. Chris Price from Chesapeake, and also from the Peninsula, Mr. Randy Willer from Poquoson. Included in your agenda today packet was a budget compendium with a lot of detailed tables that provide a lot of information on all the details of our budget. I'm not going to go through all that today. I'm just going to touch on the highlights. The first thing as you look at our budget that's important to recognize is pass-through monies versus operating revenues. The great news is, as Greg just very well demonstrated, we're being asked by you to take on work to bring monies to the region and push them through our budget out into the community. And we're really super excited to do that. A great example right now is we're managing the construction of a regional fiber network, including in Suffolk, Isle of Wight, in Southampton County, a build out of last mile broadband service in those communities. That's money that doesn't stay with us. We pass it through to contractors to build things or to manage projects. The operating expenses that come to us actually help us pay for the staff time. This year, pass-through revenues are going to be almost $34 million once again in fiscal year 25. And, there's a number of areas where, whether it's broadband, housing, Ask HR Green, emergency management, or other federal funding opportunities, many times we serve as that pass-through entity, and our financial team in Sheila's department really manages those monies and pushes them out into the regional community for your benefit. This year was a big year for doing some long outdated improvements here at the regional building. I've talked with you about this many times, but all new carpeting this year for the entire building, improvements to the boardroom, improvements to the lobby area outside the boardroom, even building fire alarm systems, smoke detectors, the website upgrades, an $80,000 investment, which was pretty big for us, even modernizing the phone network, all really big completion this year for us as we work to try to keep the building in good working order. To this building, we host anywhere between 200 and 300 meetings a year here at the building. And we really want to keep it in a condition that really meets the community's needs. I've talked with you a lot about the skylights. Work starts next week. So our 18 skylights finally will be replaced. And hopefully that will take care, or it will take care of our leaking issues. So there's been a lot that we've had to work on there. The parking lot upgrade, and Jill and Casey and others from the water department, Greg talked about their great work. They went out and they knew we had to do a new parking lot repair. They went out and found the $675,000 grant. And what we're going to do is we're going to redo that parking lot as a regional model for environmental sustainability. It will be a living best practice of how you manage stormwater to protect water quality, to encourage infiltration, and do the type of parking lot designs that we need to do as a Chesapeake Bay community. So thank you for the team, but that's going to be incredibly exciting. So this is a chart that's not such a pleasant chart to look at, and I showed you this many times, but this chart shows you since 2001 to 2025, what's happened with our member dues. And thank you. You've all been very supportive of us, and we're now up to $1 per capita from our member local governments. But the column that's distressing is the state allocation for planning district commissions. And you can see that in gold. We are formed by the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are formed by the Commonwealth of Virginia to promote and coordinate regional cooperation. But as you can see, we received $366,000 back in 2001, and that's been on a downward spiral till we get to today. Today we receive $190,000, and that's only because the General Assembly just agreed to provide us $25,000 more in the recent General Assembly session. Okay, so you have an agency that, as Greg pointed out, we're going to directly touch $48 million this year. That's not counting over $5 billion of transportation investment that flows through our finance team. And we could go on and on about other ROI, and the state is currently providing us $190,000 of base funding. So really something that we're very, very honestly disappointed in, but something we need to continue to advocate for, because without that increased state funding, it really starts to constrain what we can do as an organization. Greg couldn't resist. I really appreciate it. He said he's a recovering economist, but he threw together a couple of quick charts. And really what this shows is when you look at our revenues, both state and member dues, the member dues, you've been kind enough to increase your per capita assessment, but at the state level, our buying power in 2024 is about what it was back in 2000. And when you consider inflation, The 190,000 that we receive from the state government today, if we were to keep up with inflation, that number ought to be $660,000. So this is an issue, right? Regionalism has not been a priority to fund at the state level, and it's something that we're going to need to see if we can't turn that perspective. Okay, so in your budget compendium, you have your historical budget trend. I won't go through this in detail, but you have this as handouts in advance where you can see from 2021 to 2025 how our budget compares each year. You have some bar charts. This one shows expenditures that we anticipate for the upcoming fiscal year. That big orange bar is the pass-through. The blue bar represents our personnel cost. A big part of our expenses, obviously, are personnel. We also have pie charts in your budget that shows how much money goes to various program areas. Because we have so much funding or so little funding coming from the state, we're really forced to chase grants. That's a big part of what we do to support our operating expenses here. And those grants flow right into these programmatic areas to help us do our work on your behalf. Because we're grant dependent, we have to incur costs. Many times you go 3-4 months that you incur costs. Sheila's team prepares the reimbursement request, and it takes another 3 months to get the reimbursement back. We operate on a standalone bank account, which means we've got to have a fund balance in place to deal with the cash flow, to help us make payroll and other expenses as we wait for that reimbursement to come back to us. So those are some of the challenges that we deal with as a small organization. Personnel and Budget Committee has been great working with us on our reserves as we plan for the building improvements. I want to thank them for those efforts. So just a couple of things high level. Our operating budget for this year is about $8.5 million. If you add in the pass-through, that gets you up over $45 million. The majority of our operating costs are related to personnel-related costs, about 80%. We are providing, consistent with most of our localities, a 3.5% general wage increase for staff in this proposed budget. Some things that we're dealing with, increase in health costs. We're going to see healthcare costs go up for our organization by about $83,000. It's a concerning issue. I'm sure you're seeing it at home. Our employee contribution for health insurance is very steep. It's very high. And if you're a person here working and you paying for 2-person coverage or family coverage, if you get a 3.5% wage increase, you're probably breaking even in terms of your take-home pay. So that's something that's very concerning to us. And now, and Mayor Tuck, thank you. Mayor Tuck brought up at the TPO meeting that perhaps working with Personnel and Budget Committee, there's a chance for us to look to partner with maybe one of the localities to see if we might be able to get a more cost-efficient option. And we will certainly explore some of those conversations with our P&B committee. Federal transportation planning funding. We receive funding to support our transportation planning here. Unfortunately, we're going to see a decrease of that for our region of over 82,000 in the upcoming fiscal year. And then it's going to keep decreasing. So over the next 3 years, we're going to see almost $200,000 increase in that funding source. We do have a couple of positions that are really critically needed in our budget. You met our new staff accountant that we've brought on board, but we really have a new, looking for a new grant support specialist and a transportation data analyst that have been provided for in this budget. Fortunately, we are able to provide some staff support to other partner organizations like HRTAC or our Broadband Authority or our Military and Federal Facilities Alliance. We capture reimbursement costs for those services. But really, when you think about dedicated funding sources, so much of our funding is grant-based, and that means that you got to use that grant money for that specific program. So when we get a transportation grant, we can't use it for housing, and if we get something in housing, we can't use it for regional planning or environmental planning, or if we get something in Ask HR Green, we can't use it for housing. I know the question came up with the regional housing assessment. Can you use cost savings for staff vacancies? And unfortunately, the answer was no, because those vacancies are funded by specific grants, and we can't move between those pillars because so much of this funding is dedicated. So to do the regional housing assessment, we had to pull that from our regional fund balance. We only have about 25% of our revenues that are at play. And Greg mentioned core programs. There's some core programs, but then we get these special assignments. This is why when you get special assignments, you see Greg Pavither and I a lot, because we're really that only at large money that can move around between them. Most of our staff are really funded by those specific grant program areas. So very quickly, future challenges. I won't go through all of these, but I'll just touch on staff salaries, retention and recruitment. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've never seen a more talented organization of committed staff professionals. They are fantastic. And it's gonna, but we're gonna have to compete, because I can tell you that there are people looking at them, right? When you have strong people, when you have very talented people, they're going to get attention. And we really want to do our best to keep these exceptional staff people that we have here at the PDC. I'll jump down very quickly to the next to last bullet in the interest of time. As you all know, so we sit at about 43 staff right now, 42, 43. We have some vacancies that are 5 or 6 vacancies. But if you become an organization that goes above 50, it brings additional HR and accounting requirements. We're going to have a conversation with Personnel and Budget Committee of what that threshold looks like for us, and if it's something they want us to consider moving above. I can tell you we're getting more and more and more requests, which we're excited to receive, for us to do more and more work on behalf of the region. But we're not going to be able to do that without the necessary staff and resources to continue to provide that high quality, exceptional service. Mr. Chairman, I will pause there. The Personnel and Budget Committee's recommendation is the HRPDC approve the proposed FY 2025 budget. And I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. First, I'd just like to thank Ms. Wilson for her time and service here. Having worked with you now for a couple of years, you certainly demonstrate great competence and gives us great confidence. And thank you for that. So, Mr. Crum, we talk a lot about grants, and that's who we are as an organization. I assume that those grants help us off. There's a stipend in that helps us offset some of our expenses. Is that a set amount, or can we increase our fee, so to speak, to go against those grants to support the organization and additional staff?
I really appreciate that question, because administrative costs, or we call them M&A costs, management administration costs, are permitted to be charged in the case of some grants. But I'll be honest, in some cases, they're as low as 5%. In some cases, they can get up to 12 to 14%. I know the one item that we had a conversation about, the Personnel and Budget Committee, and perhaps I'd ask a couple of these member localities to speak to this. In the case of Isle White and Suffolk and Southampton County, they went a couple years trying to get a broadband grant approved, and they were sort of going at it alone. And when they came to the PDC after 3 years and said, "Can you help us?" And what we were able to do is land a very significant broadband grant, working together, that provided great ROI to those localities. So I know one of the things that the Personnel and Budget Committee talked about is, could there be a fee structure that if we are going to be helping localities with grant applications, that the ROI is so great that perhaps there could be a fee structure approved by this commission, with that understanding that there would be some costs to cover our time investment.
So I would say that the Budget and Personnel Committee will certainly look into that. If $5 million in grants were coming to the city of Williamsburg, I'm sure we'd be willing to pay a little bit more in administration cost to land that grant. And Ms. Ketchmark talking about 93 million you just applied for? 98 million. But that's work that she's done without any fees coming in. But it will certainly benefit all of our regions. So but certainly look forward to talking more about that. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I know we're talking about how much money we spend and how much we take in. But the way the economy has changed so much, I think we ought to consider raising the amount per capita for this organization.
Well, thank you. And that's certainly something we did just last year for the budget. And I was saying, last year we did increase it to $1.
I saw that,
And
yes.
So I know that there's,
Would you consider raising it a little bit more this year?
well, thank you, Ms. Knoll, for making that suggestion. And as we move forward into the next year's budget, maybe we'll consider that. But I think this budget's pretty well covered in terms of revenue and expenses. Mr. Crum, is that correct? Yeah.
It is. I would say though, and Ms. Knoll, thank you for that recommendation. I would very much be interested in that conversation with Personnel and Budget Committee as we look to next year.
Yes, sir. Mr. Key.
Well, Bob sort of beat me to the punch on this, but I would just like to comment about the broadband grant we received. As he said, we tried for several years and we were just unable to do it on our own. And they would only consider regional grants. And without that, the PDC taking this on for us, that's a $22 million grant between the three localities. And literally we have thousands of people now who have broadband access that we just couldn't get done on our own. So I think the service that PDC did in applying for this grant on our behalf has been invaluable. And of course, we all had to put up local matches. And I think that as we've talked in the P&B committee, it's a service that we couldn't do on our own. So, and I would just like to also point out that the state, we just had a meeting the other day where they came and evaluated, and we're I think the shining star in the state for how many people have been connected and how far along we are in the grant process. So they're very happy with the work that's being done here.
Thank you for that first-hand example. Any other questions or comments? Somebody like to make a motion to approve?
Second.
I'm Dr. Ross Hammond from Virginia Beach. I'm sitting and pondering, if we keep doing pretty much the same thing and the state is reducing, what can we do? Can we form a special task force to look at things differently? Because something is happening that it keeps going down. And we can't just keep accepting that.
I would, yes, and thank you, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
We have included in our regional legislative agenda the last couple of years the request for an increase in state funding. This year, we made a specific request for an increase of $150,000. We received a $25,000 increase. And as you see, I mean, we've got a ways to go to be able to catch up with that. I would very much appreciate a subcommittee appointed of the commission members that would work with us and help us approach specific General Assembly members to stress the need for the funding request. Mayor Glover, thank you. You came, we went to work on it, right? You were big on that, but maybe Mayor, you could speak to that, sir.
So one of the things I would like to add to that in regards to what Dr. Ross Hammond was saying, I agree with the committee, task force, what have you, because after our discussion, what was determined was all PDCs are not created equal. Is that fair? We have smaller PDCs within the state who do not have the workload, the different issues that they're dealing with. So to blanketly fund everybody the same amount doesn't make realistic sense to me. It should be based on the need and the work that you are performing and, of course, putting up the results that you're getting the things done. This PDC has been recognized for its work that it has gotten done. So I think that would be a great recommendation, and I would certainly work very hard in conjunction with all of our members to help move that along. Mr. Crum.
I think we found a chair for that subcommittee.
I'll be willing to be on it.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Excuse me, just a comment, all due respect. I mean, they're not present at this group and I don't want to say negative things, but the idea is that this budget was presented to HRTPO and there we have 4 members of the General Assembly. So it seems to me, granted, nothing wrong with the task force, but somehow for those individuals who are sitting in that meeting, we need to somehow impress upon them that same concept that, hey, not all are created equal. And given what we do accomplish, I mean, that's, they're right here. And somehow either I'll stop, but it's somehow we need to impress upon them what we do and the need to increase the funding.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, and I think Mayor Tuck is right on point, and I think the ability to be able to go with a subset of commission members to make that case, I think for them to hear from the local governments on the value that we can add, and the fact, and thank you, Mayor, we are different, right? As a Hampton Roads region, we're different because of you. We're different because you believe in regionalism, and we practice that here. And I think that results in the need for more resources to be able to support these efforts. So I think being able to have a subset of this commission that is willing to lean in with us and to do it off session, honestly, to do it this summer with key people, I think that could be very influential.
Thank you. Yes, sir. A comment?
If I might add on to that, we are in a unique position in this region with having both the President pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Delegates in our midst, not here today, but I mean, within the region. And we should definitely leverage those resources.
Excellent point. Any other comments, questions?
So if I may, I hear Mayor Glover, Ms. Knoll, Dr. Ross Hammond, as a couple of people willing to join. If there are others that would like to be involved on a working group, Dr. Word or others, please let me know. I would welcome that assistance, and working with our Personnel and Budget Committee, I think we could do some work here off session to really stress our funding needs.
Thank you. Okay, now may I have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second, thank you. All in favor? Any nays?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, takes us to item 9, the per and polyfluorinated systems.
Yes,
Osmond.
we're going to have Ivy Osmond come on up, and she will lead this presentation for you. Ivy works with Whitney and team in our Water Resources Department.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just wait for this presentation to come up. So at our board meeting in November, we heard from a few members that they would like to have a briefing on PFAS. So that's why I'm here today to speak with you all. And we're going to just focus on drinking water today. I'm sure you're going to be hearing a lot about PFAS in other sectors, but today we'll just be talking about our water systems. So the challenges with PFAS are upon us. They're here. PFAS are a class of chemicals that are here to stay. They were manufactured a very long time ago, and we're just now discovering that they're going to have a very high cost for the water sector as we deal with them. So today's presentation, we're going to walk through what PFAS are and why they're concerning, the drinking water regulations that are involved that will be limiting PFAS in water, where we stand here in the region with PFAS in our water, and what's being done to address those contaminants. And finally, we'll wrap up with the financial and logistical concerns that the water systems, not just in the region, but nationally, are going to be facing. So we'll define PFAS one time, and here forward, you're just going to hear me say PFAS, but it is actually an acronym that stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a class of chemicals that contains thousands upon thousands of different chemicals that were synthesized or man-made. They were first produced in the 1940s and have been in production since. And they were really a success story in the chemical world because they had really tremendous properties that made them very useful in a variety of applications. They're surrounding us today, whether you know it or not, because they have heat-proof, waterproof, nonstick properties that make them really useful for not just personal everyday uses, but also in military and industrial applications as well. The problem with them is that they break down extremely slowly in the environment. And because of that, they find their way into water systems or water of all kinds relatively easily. And because they don't break down, they build up in the environment. And then they also build up in living organisms, including humans, that are exposed to them over time. So if they're in production since the 40s, why are they a big deal now? Well, science has amounted over the last several decades linking potential health risks to PFAS exposure. And there are a number of different health risks that are associated that are concerning, including cancer, reproductive effects, hormonal issues. And while we don't know a whole ton about the health effects and their direct linkage with PFAS just yet, we do know that, like I said earlier, you're exposed to PFAS in a variety of different ways throughout your normal daily living. And then also potentially at higher levels if you're involved in industrial work or firefighting work, where there are chemicals with PFAS at much higher concentrations than we're seeing them in these other areas. And so we don't really have a great idea of how much PFAS is in our drinking water across the nation, but it's suspected that it has contaminated many sources. So that is one route of exposure. But as you see on screen, it's in our clothing, waterproofed clothing and materials, cosmetics, in stain-resistant applications that are applied to furniture and clothing, and even in food packaging to prohibit leakage from grease. And liquids out of containers. So there's really no way to avoid it because these chemicals have really proliferated throughout many different sectors. And yeah, so we're concerned about them in drinking water because everyone drinks water. We need it to sustain our lives. So that's why the EPA started to look at this a lot more closely, and this didn't happen overnight. The regulation that was finalized earlier in April of this year has been in development since 2009. And there are three major steps to EPA's process for regulating contaminants under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And the first one is identifying a contaminant as a potential issue in drinking water. And so to do that, they get scientists and industry experts to highlight different contaminants of concern. And PFAS was added to the list of concerning contaminants in 2009, which kicked off the regulatory development process. And three major things need to come together to be able to regulate a chemical in our drinking water. We have to generate a lot of data and assess the data on toxicology and how it affects humans and the environment. Or whether or not the contaminants occur in drinking water and at what level they're occurring. And then we also have to be able to measure those chemicals reliably in laboratories. And over the course from 2009 to the present, we made tremendous strides in being able to measure PFAS. And research, as I said before, is mounted on health risks that are associated with PFAS as well. So over this amount of time, health advisories were issued in 2016 and 2022. And you can see that the levels of determined to be safe for exposure were dropped significantly from 2016 to 2022, from 70 parts per trillion to 0.02 parts per trillion. I'll call your attention to the bottom of the slide here, looking at the laboratory detection limits. In just 10 years, we went from being able to measure PFAS at levels of 20 to 40 parts per trillion down to levels as small as 2 to 4 parts per trillion. And this is important because the health advisories were tracking those the laboratory developments, and as we're able to measure smaller and smaller quantities and the health or the advisories amount to show that there may be effects, there's more evidence that the EPA has to say there's meaningful opportunity to reduce health risks through exposure or potential exposure through drinking water. And just to illustrate how small 1 part per trillion is, 1 PPT that you'll see on the screen from here on out, it's equal or equivalent to only 1 teaspoon in a volume of equal to 2,500 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So just 4 teaspoons of PFAS of 2 specific types to violate this drinking water standard in that volume of water. And so, like I said, the regulation was published in April, and it will be in the registrar and effective June 25th of 2024. So where are we in Hampton Roads? Baseline PFAS testing has been ongoing, especially for the many proactive utilities in this region for some time. And I'm happy to report that for many utilities, the results are below limits of detection, but they are measurable in some others. And in specifically in Newport News Waterworks and in the Norfolk systems, some of the water samples that have been collected for this baseline monitoring and just getting an idea of where folks stand in these systems, they have seen violations of that 4 parts per trillion limit that is the new drinking water standard. And so I want to emphasize this map shows the state's drinking water monitoring that's been ongoing since 2021, and less than a third of the water systems throughout the state have completed baseline monitoring to determine where they fall in the category of, are we worried about PFAS or is it not a concern for our utility? And baseline monitoring is really the first step and is the most necessary step, please do, in determining whether or not your utility is going to have to address PFAS or implement PFAS treatment or change operations to address the levels and reduce them to those acceptable under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And under the new rule that is now final, the baseline testing that has to be completed by utilities must be done within 3 years of June 2024. And before spring of 2029, the compliance date for the final rule, all systems must have treatment technologies, if they do have PFAS issues, in place to reduce them to acceptable levels. And we really want to emphasize that it takes about 5 years for water systems to pilot and really understand how they're going to remove these contaminants and then construct the facilities necessary to remove them. So folks really need to hit the ground running if they already have not been working on this, which I'm happy to report again that many of the utilities in our region are working on this and have been for quite some time. And illustrating that is a great example from Newport News Waterworks. And this is an example of what will be done throughout the state to address PFAS moving forward as a model. So in recent years, Newport News Waterworks found levels of PFAS at one of their surface water intakes that they pull water from to treat to make drinking water. And following the Chickahominy River upstream, they were able to find increasing concentrations to the point where they were able to pinpoint that there may be a major source at the Richmond International Airport that's leading to the contamination of that water source. And the Virginia DEQ and Office of Drinking Water will work with utilities like Newport News Waterworks in partnership with other utilities as well. Henrico was also involved in this effort with Newport News Waterworks. But they'll collaboratively work together for systems that do have PFAS issues to help track where the sources of the contamination are coming from in an effort to reduce these compounds getting out into the environment, because that is the most effective way to control them in our water, stop them at the source. And this session of the General Assembly, there was a legislation passed that codifies this relationship between DEQ and the Virginia Department of Health, where the or agencies will work together to do that source tracking for the contaminated sites when the water systems are exceeding that drinking water standard in the monitoring that they're collecting now. So the really big highlight that is really shaking up the utilities and community is the underestimate of the cost that EPA put out when they were performing their economic impact analyses for this regulation. On the screen, I have in the top table the different size water systems that are represented here in the region, whether they're groundwater based or surface water based, the populations that they serve, so their size, and the cost that EPA estimated each system will have to add to their annualized budgets to address PFAS. And we're going to focus just on the larger systems that I have in the bold text here. And EPA estimated that it will annually cost an additional $2.2 million to address PFAS for a water system this size. But what we're finding out nationally is that, and in this state, we have two examples. Newport News Waterworks is just one of them. The cost to actually deal with PFAS coming from the engineering estimates are orders of magnitude higher. So the capital cost alone for Newport News Waterworks to address PFAS in their system, according to their engineering reports, requires the initial investment of $95 to $158 million. And what's more problematic than that is that the operations and maintenance costs, in addition to that initial investment, are going to be $15 to $25 million per year. And that's in perpetuity to continue maintaining and running these treatment facilities and those upgrades that are needed to address PFAS. And the really important takeaway from this is that there's federal funding available for capital improvements, but there is not a federal funding source dedicated for operation and maintenance. And so our fear now is that the utilities who are receiving PFAS as passive receivers, they are not using these chemicals. They just are the unfortunate and unlucky ones getting to have to deal with them and deal with the regulations to reduce them, are now going to have to bear the burden of the costs to run this these treatment systems, and they just have to fund them from somewhere, likely to come from rate revenues. So to sum it all up, we've got a number of different challenges upon us, and multiple pieces of a puzzle that are going to need to come together over the next 5 years for water systems to address PFAS. So first, we're going to see simultaneous national and not just regional, national demand for construction companies and technical assistants, the engineers that are doing the studies and informing how to develop the systems to treat PFAS. And that's of concern, especially when you think about workforce and staff retention and how everyone is dealing with that right now. Next up, we will see simultaneous demand for lab testing, and there are less than 50 United States labs that are certified to test PFAS, and you have to be certified to test PFAS to run an official drinking water sample. And the services of those labs are needed by multiple sectors and will be increasingly needed as we see further regulation in other water sectors. Recently, a new method was just approved to be able to measure PFAS in wastewater, stormwater, and other matrices. So we're going to see more demand, even just outside of the water systems, for PFAS analyses, which are extremely expensive as well. Also, the other investments that we need in water are not going to just go away. We're under mandates now that we have to inventory our distribution systems for water to make sure that we know where the lead lines are and get them all out within the next 10 years. In addition to all of the other issues that we need to address with our aging and aging infrastructure in need of upgrades, not to mention the emerging contaminants that are coming down the pipeline that they're not regulated yet, but could be just in the same way that PFAS is now. We also have concerns about the liability of disposal for the PFAS materials that were removed from water during the treatment process. The wastes that are generated by water plants have to be disposed at some point, and a new federal rule under toxicological limits, classifies two different types of PFAS and more now expected as a hazardous substance, which creates a lot of liability around the folks that are handling and then disposing of these wastes. We already see limitations in landfills being able to accept certain types of waste, and we see that being an increasing challenge as we move forward, because the landfills are also going to see regulations with PFAS as well in the way that the regulatory development is heading. And then last, and a major concern overall is the fact that trust in water is declining nationally. It requires enhanced outreach about PFAS to be able to combat the negative perceptions that the public has in hearing about these chemicals in the media, and doing a good job at really conveying that the utilities are not the source of the problem, that this was unfortunately taken on, and will have to be taken on by them, even though they were not responsible for the contamination in the first place. And that's on top of the existing trust challenges that we have. So, and not to mention also the additional notifications that are going to be required with the many different drinking water regulations that are new and forthcoming. It creates a large burden and demand on your communications staff, and that's certainly not going to go away. So with that, if you all have any questions. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. I thought maybe we were going to show this video before my talk, but it's better to have it at the end. We through Katie Cullifer's Ask HR Green Water Awareness Committee, a Drinking Water Week video was developed and aired last week during Drinking Water Week on TV, radio, and social media outlets, highlighting the great work of the water workers in our region. And on a lighter note, I just want to emphasize that the great folks that you see in this video and their teams and beyond throughout the region have been working on this issue for quite some time, and they are going to handle it as excellently as they have handled water in their history of existing. And so we don't, it's not all doom and gloom. We have really great teams on our hands, and thank you to them.
Water quality is one thing that really makes a big difference in our society, and we take that very seriously.
We do what is necessary here to support life.
It's not always exciting, but it is absolutely essential. We start at the very beginning, making sure our source water is the best it can be.
From our watersheds and reservoirs to the treatment process to your meter outside of your door.
From accounting to engineering to operations, they show up, they care, they want to improve the system and maintain the system, provide a quality service.
I've been in this field for over 30 years, and I cannot imagine doing anything else.
We're providing a life-sustaining resource to hundreds of thousands of people on a day in and day out basis.
We provide water to every home, every business, every fire hydrant, every hospital. We think about water around the clock, so you don't have to.
Thank you, Ms. Osmond. Great presentation and a lot of good information in there. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, you were so thorough, no one had any questions.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I think we're going to skip over agenda. No, we're going to go to item 10 here, Virginia Beach Event Impact Briefing.
Yeah, so as our guests come on up, I first want to thank Commission Member Josh Schulman from Virginia Beach, who reached out several months ago and said, Bob, I would love to have our team provide the commission a little bit of background information on the economic impact of some pretty exciting events that, as you all know, have been going on down at Virginia Beach at the oceanfront. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Nancy Hellman from the Virginia Beach Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome, who's going to set the stage for this and introduce our guest.
Great. Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nancy Hellman, and I'm the director of the Virginia Beach Convention and Visitors Bureau. Before I begin, I wanted to give a special thank you to Mayor Dyer and council members, Dr. Ross Hammond and Schulman, as well as City Manager Duhaney and Deputy City Manager Jarrett, and also the entire executive team and the City of Virginia Beach for their unwavering support of tourism. The primary mission of the Virginia Beach CVB is to create economic impact and enhance the quality of life for the citizens of Virginia Beach through tourism. We do that in a number of ways. We host meetings, conventions, sporting events, festivals, which we'll be talking about today, leisure vacationers, and more. The number one goal is to leave out-of-town economic impact in our city, and we market our city throughout the world, hopefully enticing prospects to make it their number one destination of choice. As you may be aware, tourism is a key economic driver for the city of Virginia Beach. We host approximately 13 million visitors a year that spend approximately $3 billion in our city. While Virginia Beach has always been known for our beautiful beaches and our family-friendly attractions, coming out of COVID, it was more important than ever to us to activate the sand and re-engage our festival program in a meaningful way. Hold on. The 2023 season was one of our busiest and most diverse to date. From a beach rodeo to art festivals to mega music festivals, and with a variety of music, there was literally something for everybody. We commissioned Dr. Vince Magnini with the Institute for Service Research to assist us with evaluating and giving us the return on investment of some of those programs. We selected a mix of new events like the Bulls and Barrels Rodeo, the Beach It Festival, and Jackalope, and legacy events like the Boardwalk Art Show, Neptune Festival, and North American Sand Soccer. Dr. Magnini worked with a large supporting cast from the city, including our city auditor's office, budget and management services, resort stakeholders, and more. Without delay, I'd like to introduce Dr. Magnini. Dr. Magnini is ranked as one of the top most prolific hospitality researchers worldwide. He's a Fulbright scholar, and he's published 7 books and more than 250 articles and reports. He's also been featured on National Public Radio's All Things Considered, with good reason, Pulse on the Planet, and he's been cited in the New York Times and in the Washington Post. The Institute for Research is a market research company that's located right in Virginia Beach, and we're sure happy to have him here. So welcome, Dr. Magnini.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the kind introduction. Let's go ahead and take a look. There we go. So today, if we may, let's highlight 3 of the festivals that we covered this past fall. And again, thank you, everyone. And very briefly, this is input-output modeling. So what went into the models, we did patron surveys. When someone went to a festival, we caught them immediately after the festival through social media and through email, and we asked them primarily how much they spent in Virginia Beach. We gave the event organizer a data sheet, and on the data sheet, we asked questions. Did you have any sponsorships coming, fresh money from outside of Virginia Beach? What kind of money did your festival or event spend in Virginia Beach? And it's just a one-page sheet that the organizer would complete. We had ticketing data for the ticketed events, and that's how we're able to tease out Virginia Beach residents versus non-residents. Smith Travel Analytics reports gave us information about hotel occupancy and how many room nights were brought by the particular event. And lastly, Virginia Beach Municipal Records, for example, cost of city services or size of sponsorship. And we took those inputs, we put them through Qualtrics, that's a surveying platform. We put them through Implan, the economic modeling platform, and outputs in the reports were economic impact, a value added effect, that would be the gross domestic product addition to the state of Virginia. This is one that typically gets a lot of media attention, the tax revenues generated within the city from the event or festival. The number of hotel rooms generated by the particular event. The return intent of the patrons, which informs whether or not we would do the event again in the future. And lastly, probably the key one would be the ROI for the city of the particular event. So I'm going to show you the ROIs for the 3 events in this presentation. And the way that the ROI works is that a $1 ROI means that the festival in fact broke even, and higher than that it made money, and lower than that it was negative. All of these outputs are in the form of ranges. And the reason they're in the form of ranges is because there are a lot of estimation that goes into this modeling. And so let's take a look. The first festival this past fall was the popular Neptune Festival, September 29th, October 1st. And the way that we estimated attendance, because this was a non-ticketed event, is that in a recent year, there was another consulting firm that's publicly available. They did a population density study at the festival. And so we took that data and we triangulated that with the tickets that were sold for the sand sculpting competition, the 8K race registration, the number of people in the race. And then we also triangulated that with the vendor revenues. And we estimated that roughly 212,000, you'll see that at the bottom of the screen there, roughly 212,000 folks attended that festival. And if you remember back, Friday was not a good day with regard to weather. It was a little bit drizzly and rainy. So if you see, it was a little bit light on Friday, but then things picked up the rest of the weekend. All right, so what the modeling did is we said that 45% were Virginia Beach residents of the patrons, and Virginia Beach residents spent about $161 at the festival. And if you look at that top line of spending there on the left-hand side, you will see lodging expenditures of about $31 for Virginia Beach residents. That's because some of the residents actually made staycations out of the event itself. Most did not, but the average was $31 because some of them, even though they were residents, stayed in hotels or short-term accommodations. And this is an important note here, that red box at the bottom. We only include, the way that this modeling works, the resident spending that would have leaked from the city had the event not occurred. And we asked that on the survey. If you had not spent this money at the Neptune Festival, would it have stayed in Virginia Beach or would it have leaked out? And most of that money would have been spent otherwise in Virginia Beach. Only about 22% would have leaked out. So in the in-plan economic modeling, only 22% of that spending was entered into the modeling. Now, with regard to non-residents, that's about 55% of attendees at the Neptune Festival. And of course, they spent more because their lodging was much higher. Inside Virginia Beach, they spent about $355 across the weekend. And here's what we call primacy. We ask on the survey, what degree of your visit to Virginia Beach was due to this particular festival? Because it's not economic impact if someone is here anyway and they say, hey, look, the Neptune Festival is going on, let's stop by. And so what we found is that about 78% of the spending by non-residents was in fact due to the festival. And you will see a wide margin in that box that just popped up. The estimated hotel rooms in Virginia Beach are estimated between about 21,000 and 27,000. That's a wide margin. It's wider than the margin of error for all the other outputs. And that's because there's a lot of noise in the hotel data, because sometimes guests are not forthcoming regarding how many people they put in a given hotel room. So we have to take the margin of error a little bit higher there. All right, so with regard to the economic impact, you have direct effects between 16.6 million and 18.7 million, and a total output of 24.5 to 27.7 million. Now, sometimes the secondary effects of indirect and induced get a bad rap out there, but not in festival studies. If you conduct economic modeling on an event that has already happened, then the secondary effects are axiomatic. Is different if you're trying to project economic impacts of a future project, but because we know for a fact that the direct effects occurred, then the indirect and induced effects are axiomatic. So it's a pretty good economic impact there. Let's take a look a little bit further. The contribution to the gross domestic product of Virginia for the Neptune Festival is about 15.2 million. But then, as we already mentioned, a lot of times what we like to look at is the tax revenues for the municipality. And what we have here is that the Neptune Festival produced between 1.3 million and 1.43 million city tax revenues in Virginia Beach. Most folks said that they would like to return next year. Return intent's about 82%. And lastly, for the Neptune Festival, here is the return on investment. And if I may, I'm just going to read the first few lines word for word really quickly. As determined in this modeling, the city earned between 1.3 and 1.43 million in tax revenues. The city's expenditures, on the other hand, are tabulated approximately 496,000. Therefore, employing these figures, it can be estimated that every dollar spent on this event by the city yielded a return between $2.56 and $2.89. So this was a positive event. Of the 8 events that we studied, 3 were not positive, but this was one of the positive ones. There's some more dialogue on that slide discussing about how the Neptune sponsorship actually gets used throughout the year. So therefore, that's a conservative number because we only look at the boardwalk weekend in this particular study. So now let's go on to the second study. It's a popular festival called the Virginia Mocha Boardwalk Art Show, which happened in October. And here it's non-ticketed. And what we had to do is we used drones to measure how many people were there. And you will see that the busiest weekend or the busiest time period over the weekend was Saturday afternoon. That's that peak there. The highest peak is early Saturday afternoon. Regarding the data, about 59% were Virginia Beach residents, and they spent about $182 across the weekend. And only about 20% of that spending would have leaked out in the absence of the festival. So about 80% of folks, if they hadn't spent it there, would have spent it somewhere else in the city doing something else. About 41% were non-Virginia Beach residents. They spent about $336, and the primacy there was about 81%, slightly over 81%. And room nights, we're looking at about 2,400 room nights to about 3,000 room nights. And again, the range is pretty wide there. Regarding economic impact, the total economic impact, including indirect and induced, would be between 5 million and 5.6 million. Contribution to the state's GDP would be about 3 million, and tax revenues to the city of Virginia Beach, we're looking at between 156,000 and 178,000. So lastly, for this particular festival, we have the return intent of about 87%, so that's solid. But then lastly, we have a return of investment that looks like this. As determined in this modeling, the city earned between 156,000 and 178,000 in tax revenues. The city's expenditures, on the other hand, are tabulated at approximately 205,000. Therefore, employing these figures, it can be estimated that every dollar spent at this event yielded a return between 82 cents and 87 cents. So this was one of the 3 that actually produced a negative ROI in 2023. Lastly, we had the Jeep Fest that occurred at the oceanfront in the middle of November. And this one, I guess we don't use the term ticketed, but you register your Jeeps. So essentially it is ticketed in the sense that we had really good attendance numbers. And these are the registrations for the particular cruises or sand courses across the weekend. 32% were Virginia Beach residents. Spent about $197. Something that jumped out at me with this is that a lot of this money would have leaked out. These Jeep folks are apparently, whether you call it a hobby, pastime, sport, whatever term or phrase we use, these people are very loyal to this activity. And if it hadn't occurred in Virginia Beach, it would have leaked out of Virginia Beach. That's what that number down there tells us at the bottom. And the vast majority, about 2/3 of patrons at Jeep Fest came from outside Virginia Beach. Their spending profile was high, about $500, just shy of $500. And take a look at that primacy, if you would. They came here specifically for Jeep Fest. The primacy was 97%, so it was not a side activity. And it produced about 2,900 to 3,500 room nights. The direct economic impact is about 110 to about $1 million. Total output goes up to about 1.33 to 1.49, including secondary. GDP contribution about 808,000. And here we go. Tax revenues to the city of Virginia Beach about 69,000 to about 78,000. Most of these folks would come back if Jeep Fest was offered again next year. That's what they tell us here. Almost 9 out of 10 would come back. And lastly, return on investment is the strongest of the three. This one's up there. As determined in this modeling, the city earned between 69,000 and 78,000 in tax revenues. That doesn't seem like a lot, but the city didn't spend very much on this particular event. If you see there that they spent about 16,000. Therefore, for every dollar spent on this event, the city earned between $3.02 and $3.41. So that covers the 3 fall festivals. No research is perfect. This is no exception. A lot of people say, well, what about the passive advertising that this yielded in markets that Virginia Beach doesn't typically get a voice in? The modeling doesn't capture that. So this modeling is conservative. Also, this modeling does not tease out. So if a particular event had a positive effect on quick service restaurants, but actually hurt fine dining restaurants, there's no way to tease out in this modeling. So this modeling is not perfect. There are limitations. But let's take a look at a summary slide. I never get tired of that curtain. All right. All right, this is a summary from the 3 events that we just discussed. So economic impact across all 3 events combined, 30.8 to 34.8 million. City revenues range from 1.5 million to 1.7 million. City expenses, 729,000. And room nights between 26,000 and about 34,000. And as Nancy mentioned, we studied 8 events in 2023. So just very briefly, we also looked at Bulls and Barrels in the spring, Something in the Water, Jackalope, the North American Sand Soccer Championship, and Beach It Country Music Festival. And the results from all 5 of those are across the bottom of the screen. And if we tally all 8, this is what it looks like. Across the 8 events that we studied, we had an economic impact between 93.7 million to 105.5 million. City revenues, 5.4 million to 6 million. And city expenses, about 4.2 million. So you can see there that the city earned just shy of about $1 million on these 8 events in revenues. And the hotel room nights are significant in my assessment, between about 60,000 room nights and about 78,000 room nights. Now we should note that one of the festivals that did not produce a positive ROI was a festival that was called Jackalope. That's because I'll go backward just really quickly. No, I'm not going back. Well, anyway, okay, there. Jackalope, the 3rd one down. Please note that that one was free and open to the public, and it was the first year, and it's coming again in a couple of weeks. And I feel like I'm rambling. So with that said, I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Magnani. I'm sure Mayor Dyer has a comment.
Oh, of course.
This is
No,
your
but I
town.
just want to thank that, once again, that we are a region. And once again, this is an attraction that makes the entire region, good when folks come down to take a look at the quality of life in all of our cities. The fact that we do have, a tourist destination, and Williamsburg is certainly, once we get people here and they want to go see other parts. So I think that is very, very important, to go. But like even with Jackalope, we try to have something for everybody. We have a broad spectrum of events that attracts various people, to the ocean front. And, Jackalope is free. But once again, this is a, what they call a, it's an added event that, we, bring forward just to get people out there. And we're proud of the fact that so many people from our entire region, come out and take advantage. And, but once again, I think that if we look at, as us as a region, this is just a regional asset, and we really appreciate the ability to come and, share it with you.
Well, thank you for Virginia Beach for supporting these events, and thank you again, Ms. Hellman, Mr. Magnini, for being here today. In the interest of time, if anybody has any questions, maybe you can find them afterwards and share some questions with them and get some answers. And so with that, we are skipping agenda item 11. And Mr. Crum, would you walk us through the rest of the agenda, please?
Yes, you have in your agenda our upcoming meetings. Just as a reminder, we take June off, so our next meeting will be on July the 18th. Also are some meeting minutes from our various advisory and technical committees and just some correspondence for information. That's all I have today, sir.
Good. And so we will adjourn. Do I need a motion for that? We're adjourned. Thank you very much. So many different meetings, some call for motions and